Hi, I'm Steve Nathans Kelly, editor of Streaming Media Producer. Recently, I had the chance to speak with Kyle Shannon, founder and CEO of Storyvine, about an intriguing new app called Storyvine Now, which is tailor-made for our current remote production realities and the ongoing election season.
Storyvine in general, the ability to do remote video production, like all of a sudden got more relevant because we're all at home, right? So whether it's Zoom calls or whether it's, remote video production, it got more relevant. So I think that condition or whatever the condition we're in has benefited the company overall. But yeah, the Storyvine Now product, the difference between it is historically Storyvine has been very much kind of a service-heavy enterprise product where when we work with Pfizer, for example, we'll sit down with them and say, who do you want to tell their stories? Well, we want our patients for this brand to tell their stories. Okay, what kind of stories do you want to tell? We want to talk about diagnose. So it's a very, consultative sell, very customized. The Storyvine Now product are pre-built template kits. So the way Storyvine works, it's a template-based system where our app guides an end user step-by-step through telling a specific story. And that, that's sort of templatized. So the Storyvine Now product is we've pre-built kits for very specific use cases. So the first two that we launched with are political campaign kit and the ballot initiative kit. And so that allows, we actually just got off a kickoff call with someone for a campaign. It allows them to do, like, the three templates in that kit are a grassroots supporter template, a campaign update template, and then an issues or policy template. And the call I just got off, it was really cool because apparently the candidate, he's like this older dude and he just rambles on. He's like, I'll make my own videos. And he's making like these 10-minute long, unintelligible videos. So Storyvine's going to literally guide him through what's the issue, why is it important, where do you stand on it? So because of that structured nature, it's going to allow the campaign manager to work with that candidate to tighten things up. But anyway, it's our first product that it's literally, you can log in, swipe your credit card, upload your logo, and go make as many videos as you want.
Cool. And so of course, everybody's in different places right now. So maybe you're working with a campaign manager or a media strategist, and they're setting it up, and then the candidate is in their basement or somewhere, right? And then does the video, and so then they have a chance to say, well, this was not quite what we wanted, probably not because of you, but maybe because of where the candidate went with the questions. But and then they can do it again.
Yeah, and the way it works, the app literally guides the candidate or grassroots supporter step by step through a series of prompts. And then for each of those prompts, they can do as many takes as they want. So one of the pieces of coaching I just gave to the campaign manager was, tell the candidate that he can look at the little counter to see how long he's been recording, or after he's recorded, he can see how long the clip is. And if it's too long, he can just re-record it. So they can do as many takes as they want in each of those little segments. And then those are what gets sent up to the cloud. They get stitched together, as we call it, automagically, automated editing. And 5 minutes later, you've got a fully edited video that is now available in this back-end dashboard, where in this case, the campaign manager, essentially 5 minutes after the candidate made the video, they're looking at a fully edited video. So if it's too long or they didn't do what they wanted, they just email them and say, okay, do it again. But, don't go so long on question 2. Or if it's good to go, they can literally push a button and it pushes it out to YouTube.
And so the campaign manager has some involvement in directing the content too, right? So they're working on that in advance, and then so they kind
they can or they don't have to. Like in that case, a campaign manager might say, here are the 4 topics you want to talk about. But the whole purpose of the guidance is that it's guiding someone exactly what to say. So like a grassroots supporter doesn't need to prepare anything. Like, the prompts for the grassroots supporter are, share your name, where you live, and why you support the candidate. And then the next segment is talk about the issue that's most important to you and why it's important, right? So it gets to really flesh out the thing that they're most important about. And then the final take is, say your name and I support candidate X, right? And it literally prompts them to do it. So you can, someone like a candidate can absolutely prepare for stuff, but doesn't have to. but the end user, they're guided what to say. That's the nature of the product, is those templates are the recipe.
And so I think one thing we've all learned over the last few months, if we didn't know it already, is that you're a lot better off shooting something like this from an iPhone or an Android phone or something like that than you are with the webcam that came on your laptop. So is this strictly an app, or is this something that somebody might do on their computer as well?
We haven't built web capture. Actually, I've been thinking about this problem for so long that the original design of the product was webcams only, because these things literally didn't exist. So now that they exist, the fact that I can go anywhere, like I'm not as restricted. The other problem with desktop or laptop cameras is, you pointed out one, a lot of times they're really crappy quality wise, but also it's just a lot of desktops don't have cameras. Like, we can't make an assumption that someone on the Mac operating system or on Windows actually has a camera. So at some point, if we're doing much more, if we stay this isolated at our desks for much longer, it might actually become a requirement that it wouldn't have been otherwise. But we do live in a world where most people have access to, a device with a camera, iOS or Android device. So, it hasn't become a burden for us.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of saving them from themselves if you restrict it to their phone device. That it doesn't look like it came off a webcam.
Yeah, exactly.
So just maybe just walk me through a little bit of kind of what my experience would be if I'm getting ready to give a testimonial, or
So as an end user or someone who purchased the subscription?
Well, let's do both. Let's do both.
Okay. So as an end user, if the organization has sort of pre-signed you up for a template, then you'll receive an email that says you've been signed up. And if they've pre-signed you up, they probably know you and told you it was coming. But basically, you get an email that says, "Hey, you've been signed up, for Storyvine for this specific project. And here are links to download the Storyvine app. And here's a video, like a how-to video with video best practices. Like, we put in some pro video tips, like don't film in front of a bright window or you'll look like you're in the witness protection program. Don't cover up the microphone with your hand or we won't be able to hear you. And that's really important, So we try to do it.
This is my life for the last 5 months.
Yes.
By the way.
Yeah. Well, and there are 5 of them. Like, there are 5, right? It's don't cover up the microphone, make sure we can see you, make sure you're framed right. Look at the camera, right? Because everyone looks at their face, but the camera's over here, right? So that's included in that. And then basically, you as an end user, you would just download the Storyvine app, you launch it, you put in your email. That gives you access to one or more templates. Generally, it's one. So in the case of grassroots supporter, you would be automatically, signed up for that grassroots supporter template. You enter some text, and then you follow the bouncing ball. Like, it literally has a dotted outline where you put your head in the frame, and it tells you take a picture for the video. So you hold it at arm's length, or put it on a tripod, or give it to the missus to film. And that's actually a really interesting distinction. People can film selfie style, and younger folks tend to be more there. People who understand video or who are older will often get someone else to film them. Both are fine. I think selfies tend to be a little more authentic feeling because you're a little closer because the camera's only at arm's length. But when someone else is filming, they tend to be framed up a little better. So there's advantages to both. And then it's literally just, follow the clips. The philosophy of Storyvine is that for the person sharing their story, they're not having to worry about any of the creative decisions. They're not picking background music. They're not picking colors. They're not picking themes. All they're doing is answering questions, right? Their only job is to tell their story. All of those other creative decisions have been made up front. So sitting up in the cloud is, the framework, the shell of this video with all the graphics and background music and things like that. So you would answer questions in the app. You hit the upload button. Those clips go up to the cloud. They get stitched together into that visual storyboard automagically, Automagic editing. And then 5 minutes later, a fully edited video is ready to review. Depending on the setup, You as the story maker, you as the person who, you know, answered the questions in the app, you'll get back an email with your video that you can share. For political campaigns, we don't automatically send that email because it's a political campaign. So let's say someone from the other side got hold of that template and they wanted to film a video. So that's part of what we learned in working with pharma, is the importance of security and making sure that the message doesn't go out unless it's the right message, right? Because in pharma, it's a regulated environment. So people go to jail if the wrong message gets out, right? So that experience has been really good for us in being able to understand that dynamic for politics. And then that's basically it. And then from there, you know, like once the video's been approved and is back in your hands, you can upload it to YouTube, you can share it to Twitter or Facebook or wherever you want to share it. So it really is as simple as answer some questions in an app and pring, out comes a fully edited video. That's so that's you as the story maker. Now, as the subscription buyer, you basically have this dashboard where you control everything. So you get to upload your logo, you get to set your primary and secondary colors, you get to, you know, put terms of service and legal releases that include your legal name. Like there's a bunch of just stuff, sort of housekeeping stuff that needs to be done to be able to run this. So you have the rights to all the videos. So that's all handled in that back-end dashboard. Then I have the option I can manually assign people to be story makers. So story makers are users of the app, or I can use the sign up form that I can just send them a link and say, hey, here's a sign up form, you know, fill in your name and email here, you know, give us permission to, you know, I don't know, terms and conditions and privacy, and then you're off to the races. So they can do it that way. And then once videos come into the system, they can review the videos, they can fix typos if they need to. They can review that legal release take. One of the segments that's recorded is literally the person saying, hi, my name's Bob, and you have my permission to use this video, the legal version of that. And then once they're happy with the video, once it's in its final form, they push a button and it pushes it straight to their YouTube channel.
Oh, great. And then, so when the video is ready and, you know, they can send it to YouTube or Facebook. So what is that video? Is that going to be a 1080p MP4?
There's 720p. There's 720p at a fairly low bit rate, because we're asking people to upload the raw clips, and you know, especially when you start getting into 2K and 4K stuff, like the file sizes get ridiculous. So part of it's that, but part of it's also, you know, the nature of these is this tends to be people, you know, sort of talking about something in a super authentic way. So you don't need production value. Like we've done templates before where we've incorporated professionally shot B-roll, and you know, you can do more sophisticated templates. But for something like a grassroots supporter video for a campaign, like it needs to be like, oh, that's my neighbor Sally, and wow, she actually seems like she likes this guy. Oh yeah, I care about healthcare too. Like you know what I mean? The purpose of it needs to be professional enough, right? It needs to be a well-structured story. It needs to be authentic. We need to believe it. And it, you know, and it needs to be well presented, like on brand, on message. And that's what Storyvine does. So we've kind of purposefully lowered the bar there just because of, you know, those two issues, upload speed, and it's not really required to go much fancier than that.
Yeah. I mean, I would think the accepted aesthetic is different for this than it is for a pharmaceutical company. Making
yeah.
ad, you know, or,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're going to put something on broadcast, and then you could use, you know, Storyvine captured, you know, raw assets where you might incorporate them into some higher end, you know, piece of video where you're kind of sprinkling in a little authenticity in a higher produced piece. We see that a lot, and it's super effective, right? And in fact, you know, I mean, you this is the world you're in, but like it's sort of blown me away, the speed with which we've gone to, you know, Zoom calls being on broadcast TV, and like American Idol was produced with, you know, iPhone 11 Pros, you know, and they're switching between them. And, you know, we've pretty quickly gone from broadcast is one level of video and everyone else is doing crappy video. And now it's like all on broadcast. So I think those lines have blurred even further because of COVID.
So you're not doing anything with unusual aspect ratios, like things like tailored for Instagram or anything anything like that?
We can on the output side. I have, as a founder, I have resisted capturing things in vertical because I figure until until evolution kicks in and our eyes go vertical, that, you know, actually seeing things, you know, the way your eyes are designed in your head. And I kind of have a philosophy of it. I feel like if you're doing like super short, punchy, either TikTok or like 30-second, you know, Instagram-y kind of video, vertical and square is fine. If you're telling something that's a narrative, like one of the distinctions of Storyvine, even though it's mobile captured video, we're doing structured storytelling. So these are narratives, right? This is someone, you know, in the case of pharma, they're talking about, you know, their diagnosis journey, or, you know, what it's like to live with stage 4 cancer, right? That's a story. So my philosophy is, if we're telling a narrative, like I want it in that kind of expected convention of a traditional aspect ratio. One of the cool things about Storyvine, though, is the raw assets are distinct from the output. So you can actually do multiple outputs for the same input. So we very regularly will do a thing where the longer form narrative is 16:9, but then we'll do an output template that's square, or, you know, 4:5 vertical, where we're just sort of cropping in on an image and, you know, putting a logo and text, you know, up and down, you know, that's the social media teaser version that drives traffic to that longer form thing that might live on YouTube or might live on a website.
Cool. And so in terms of when you sell this to the campaign, so it's is it subscription based? So they're paying by the month? Or are they actually paying by the video that they use it for? Or?
They're paying by the month. You know, one of the things we learned very early on is if you charge per video, a couple of things happen. It very quickly commoditizes the product, where people are they always want to pay less per video and less per video, and, you know, down to zero, right? But there's an interesting psychological thing. One of our earliest clients, I think we had a monthly limit of 1,000 videos. Like, it was a ridiculously large number of videos. And in the kickoff meeting, the person that bought the subscription, you know, said to this room full of people, just so you know, like, you know, we have a cap of 1,000. So, you know, make your video, but, you know, just know that's the cap, but you can make as many as you want. Nobody filmed, because everyone was afraid they were going to put them over the thing. So the whole idea is, like, you know, we're trying to lower the barrier to kind of democratizing video storytelling. And so if we have anything that gets in the way of that, we want to remove that. So it's a monthly subscription. It includes unlimited videos. It includes, you know, whatever, in the case of Storyvine now, whatever those pre-built templates are, the ability to customize them, and then, you know, all that back-end dashboard where you can manage all that content.
Did you find you were able to anticipate everything they were going to need to know to be able to do this in the way you imagined they would? Or have you found that you're amending the process as people maybe stumble over things you didn't expect?
It's a great question. So, like, what you're getting at is the questions are everything. Those prompting questions are everything. I'll share an anecdote that's semi-related, and then I can unpack it a bit more. So when we were first starting the company, I don't even think we had tech yet. I was doing a lot of work in LA, and I went out to LA, and I was meeting with a, you know, decently successful screenwriter. And I was explaining to him what Storyvine was, and I was explaining to him this idea. And I think the first example I had was a real estate example. And he was trying to, like, Storyvine's really interesting because you're essentially flipping video editing upside down. Instead of going and getting a bunch of raw assets and then figuring out what the story is and cutting it together, we're sort of defining what the story is and then just capturing those sound bites, right? So he was having a tough time getting his head around the concept of, like, breaking it up into these little story beats. And so I walked him through this real estate example, and one of the questions was, who's your ideal customer, right? Makes perfect sense, right? And whatever happened where a light bulb clicked for him, and he goes, I get it now. He goes, this is all about the questions. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, the question you wrote was, what's your ideal customer? He goes, the answer to that question is always going to be boring, and it's always going to be the same. It's always going to be, well, I want, you know, a nice neighborhood with good schools where my dogs can run and frolic, right? Like, you know, it's going to be an uninteresting answer. But he goes, if you rewrote the question to be, tell me about a time you changed someone's life in real estate. Like now you get really interesting stories and you still get who their ideal customer is, right? Like without it being this really sort of pablum kind of thing. So the questions are everything. We've learned a couple of things. One of the things you give up with Storyvine is control, right? So people that are used to doing interviews, you know that you want to ask these 5 questions. You write 30 questions, which are all variations of those 5, so that you can come at the interview from all these different angles, right? If they're not going to answer it that way, I'm going to come at it, So a good interviewer. So we don't have that luxury, right? We can't do the inquiry. But what we found is that a lot of the archetypal stories are very, very similar. And so, especially when you're dealing with something like a customer testimonial for a product company, or you're dealing with a grassroots supporter video, they're all going to be some version of the same, right? So they need to be specific enough that people can actually answer it enough, but they need to be open-ended enough so that they can put their personal story in it. And then you basically need to run them sort of up and down a narrative arc, right? So if we're talking about a diagnosis journey for a patient, well, let's start with who are you and when were you diagnosed? Okay, I can do that. My name's Jane and I was diagnosed with this in 1987. Next question, when were you diagnosed and how did that feel? Oh, I can do it. So part of it is, figuring out if I were that story maker, what would be the next logical question so that I'm not asking non sequiturs. Like if you ask non sequiturs, it confuses people. They're like, well, wait, I thought I was talking about when I was diagnosed. Now you're asking me about my favorite pet. Like non sequiturs don't work. You have to be careful not to write overlapping questions where if they answer question 1 and then they get to question 2 and it's what they thought they answered for question 1, that blows their mind. So it's this really interesting balance between just making sure you've got a little mini hero's journey that makes sense for the person answering the questions. The questions are distinct and simple. We try to avoid compound questions because then someone's rambling on trying to figure out, wait, what was that second question? Right? And they're lost, and then you get rambly answers. So just tight single questions that when you stitch them together, it makes sense to answer them. Anyone can answer them, and then when you stitch them together, it tells the story. So it's a bit of an art. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but that is the magic of the platform. When you get those questions right, you consistently get well-told stories, well-structured, well-told, that are really personal and interesting.
Yeah, it's a long answer, but it was a great answer.
Okay, good. Good. Thanks.
And so then when it comes to the editing, obviously you're trying to, you don't want everything to be predictable to the viewer, but you want it to be predictable to the editor, particularly because this is Automagic editing, right? So I'm thinking there's not human intervention in the editing.
Nope.
And so what do you do if I'm answering a question and I go in one direction and then I stop and go in a completely different direction? How does the editor deal with that?
So in general, that doesn't happen. Like when we get those prompting questions right, 90+% come in, some version of usable. Then you're back to sort of a normal bell curve of quality. Like, 2 people are really crappy at talking and, thinking at the same time, and 2 people are brilliant at it and a bunch in the middle. So the vast majority of content comes in essentially as predicted, but you'll get people that ramble on, or you'll get someone who just does veer off track. With the enterprise versions of the product, you have access not only to the final video, but you have access to the raw clips. So I'll give you a farm example. We had a client for a big pharmaceutical client. One of the patients in her video said, being diagnosed with cancer was like being hit by a Mack truck, which is a great line, but it's someone else's trademark. So the lawyers were like, that sentence has to go. So the agency was able to download that clip, trim out that sentence, put it back into the Storyvine system, hit rebuild, and 5 minutes later, they had a version of the video. So in the enterprise version of the product, you could actually edit that out without actually having to go into Final Cut Pro or anything like that. You can just pop that clip into QuickTime and, and then hit rebuild in the Storyvine system, and now you have a new version of the video. With the Storyvine Now product, you could download the finished video and just trim out that segment. So you could just manually trim it out. but also in that back end dashboard, you have the email of the person that filmed that video. So you can actually reach back out to them and say, hey, that was awesome. In segment 2, you sort of went off in this other direction. Can you do it again, but say just what you did before, but just don't go off in that direction? They can actually load all the other clips from the camera roll and then just re-record question 2. So there's a bunch of ways you can manage that stuff.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me, because I edited a magazine where I had a columnist who was just an absolute control freak. He was an event videographer, and a lot of his work was getting people to tell their stories, and then he'd show it at the bar mitzvah, or he'd show it at the wedding. And this guy explained in his column that what he would do was he would have somebody answer a question, and then he'd say, that was good, but say it again just like this, and it's like the diametric opposite of what you're doing. Like, you're trying to make this as hands-off as possible, but still get what his end goal was.
Yeah, exactly. And what's funny about that is there's a thing that happens with Storyvine that when you've got a director who knows what they're doing, you don't face this at all. There's a thing that happens with Storyvine sometimes. Human beings are human beings, and no one wants to look stupid, right? No one wants to look silly, not smart. So sometimes that neuroses will take over people, or if they're particularly, over preparers, right? They'll write themselves a script. And then, and we'll sometimes get the question, do you have teleprompting, built into your app? And the answer is no. And I considered it for a lot of years, but I'm actually not considering it anymore, because what ends up happening is, unless you've got 20 years of media training and you're a CEO at a big corporation, chances are you can't read off a teleprompter without looking like you're reading off a teleprompter. What we end up getting sometimes are videos where, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Someone will say, hi, my name's Bob, and I'm really excited about working with, and they look like hostage videos. And so why Storyvine is guided and not scripted is for exactly that if we write those questions right, we're prompting someone to just answer that question based on who they are and what they know. And very often, these are things that, like, if someone has taken the time to sign up to make a grassroots supporter video for a campaign, and they've downloaded an app, and they've launched the app and input their text, and they've taken a picture of themselves, by the time they get to that first question, when the prompt is introduce yourself and where you live, like, they're already on a journey to tell that story, right? So they kind of want to be telling their story. And if we've done our job right, we don't put any hurdles in their way. So basically, if you can get someone to that point, you tend to get stuff that's super authentic, but it's also decently well articulated, because they're just answering one thing, one specific piece of a story. That's the other thing that this is sort of story theory geeky. So, this is probably not article appropriate, but story makers, the people telling their stories, they don't necessarily think, oh, this is a mini hero's journey. They don't necessarily think this is a story arc, or I'm telling my story. Their experience is, oh, I just answered some questions. And one of the things that happens with Storyvine, like we sometimes call it the happy maker, because everyone's kind of nervous about, I don't want to look bad, I don't want to sound silly, all that sort of stuff. Their experience is, I answered some questions and I felt kind of awkward doing that. And then what ends up happening is they get back a video that's well edited, where they look good because it's well framed. There's graphics on it, which, that's only usually on TV. Do you get graphics on your video, right? That look like that. And then they often say this, I don't sound as stupid as I felt. Like, I look better than I thought I would, and I don't sound as stupid as I felt. And that's because they're telling a story, right? And they weren't conscious that they were doing that, because that's kind of the art of the thing, is let's let the professionals put the story framework together and then just let people answer the questions. But the result is they're often very pleasantly surprised about what came out.